Welcome to your daily dose of theological German, where a sentence a day keeps the dissertation detractors away, especially if you're writing a dissertation these days on Paul Tillich, because that's who we're reading. So, if that's your primary source, I suppose this is for you especially, but it's also for the rest of us who are just trying to get our heads around theological German and just German reading in general. Theological and philosophical German is some of the most complex, so let's hop right to it. This is the 9th installment in this article about the theology of culture by Paul Tillich. So before we get started, I just have to say Tillich has been behaving himself up until this point in this essay. If you've been watching the episodes, sometimes we've even been doing 2 or 3 sentences because they've been nice and brief and often single clause or not too complicated multi-clause, and we've been able to put them into quick English sentences. It's been wonderful. But at this point in the essay, it's like Tillich got through about a page and realized, hey, wait a minute, I'm writing in German, and this is like a philosophical sort of a topic. So you know what? Screw it. It's time for a real German sentence. Here you go. Wow, that is the next sentence in this article. All one sentence. I don't know why people do this, but this is what they do. Okay, here's the thing though. Paul Tillich's a bit of a cheat. You'll see there's a semicolon here and this und. So really what's happening is he's strung 2 sentences together. He just wanted it to flow in a kind of a, punchy way. And so he's using punctuation, shall we say, liberally and creatively to get away with things that we would never get away with in English writing. But we're going to have to translate this into English. And so with that in mind, it's probably best to split this into 2 episodes. So first we'll just take half of it. And we'll translate this today, and then we'll deal with the other half tomorrow. So before we get started, let's just maybe make that a little bigger. So before I start translating, I just want to point out one of the things in German where they'll create these long adjectives. Okay, so this is going to be something like cultural scientific. The problem is we don't want to use an adjective like that in English, especially for this, because Tillich actually means something very specific by this. It's a concept he's been introducing. And so you want to probably in English use a prepositional phrase that will modify the noun. So here the noun is this Allgemeinbegriff, which we saw in a previous episode. We're going to translate something like universal concept. And so he's modifying this universal concept with the idea of something to do with cultural science. And a cultural science to Tillich is sort of those fields of study, those disciplines that are not the empirical sciences, that have somehow within their view something that is culturally embedded or somehow culturally experienced, etc. And so it would be better here to say every universal concept in the cultural sciences is either useless or it is a veiled, and then you have this other term. You'll notice that this term is similar in terms of the second half of it to this term up here. And so what's going on here is Tillich is making a contrast between a universal concept and this other Normbegriff, which is often you'll see it translated something like standard term. I think what Tillich is referring to here, though, is a term or a concept that is embedded within a particular context of discourse. And so, in other words, it can't be a universal concept because it's culturally constrained within a particular context. Okay, and so I'm not sure how you would translate that exactly, but that's the idea. So you can still just say standard term. It's a veiled standard term. It's not, a term that identifies something. It's not a universal concept in the philosophical sense that Tillich is interested in. And then you're going to have a bunch more comparatives or either or statements just like this in equative clauses. And so these are all pretty straightforward. So let's just quickly work through them. It is either a description of a nothing, so or you don't have to say of a nothing, although there is an article there. A thing here you should notice about Tillich is that he puts an article in front of nothing, but then he doesn't put an article at all in front of description. So you kind of, in English, when you're translating, this is part of just Tillich's style. You'll have to add articles where they aren't there in German and remove them where they are. It just depends on what's going to make the most sense in English. So you want to kind of be on the lookout for that. You don't have to be totally wooden. So let's see. It is either a description of nothing or it is an expression of a point of view, a perspective. It is, and now he's actually going to drop this entweder, and you've still got to assume that's kind of the sense, though. He's still making an either or contrast. He's just now making it briefer because this is now the third in a series of kind of apositive statements. So it is a worthless husk, or it is a Schöpfung, which means a creation, but more like an invention. And in fact, this word is used specifically in contexts where terminology is being coined or something like that. And so that's what he has in view. He's talking about you're inventing a term out of a particular concept. And so these things are all kind of paralleling each other, right? It's like it's either just useless as a universal concept, or it's specific to some situation. It's either you're describing nothing, or it's an expression of the particular situation, point of view, standpoint that you are operating out of. It is either a useless husk, shell, whatever, or it is a term that you have coined, that you have invented. It's not a universal concept. It's an invented terminology for a particular purpose embedded within a particular context. Thus, it is simultaneously, and this is an interesting phrase here, let's be really wooden about this. So you can say in higher or lower mass. Okay, so in English we have a similar expression where we mean to a greater or lesser extent. In German, this is the way you say that. So it is simultaneously to a greater or lesser extent an invention of the sphere, which I think you could just paraphrase even as of the context in which the individual who's making the term stands.